Welcome to Running on Reddit, r/ProRevenge, where people get back at someone after being wronged in a pro-revenge way. During the dot-com boom in the late 90s, I became somewhat well known for my expertise with a now somewhat obsolete networking technology. I ended up getting heavily recruited by a big telecom firm in Denver to run the technical side of a huge networking project they had underway. After multiple phone interviews, I was invited out for the big in-person sit-down, a 2-day affair where I met with the big dogs, other techies, HR, etc. It was a pretty killer opportunity. Took the trip. First day of meetings went great. I felt it was a great match, etc. I did sense there was some tension between two groups over network architecture. Turned out that was one of the reasons they were bringing in someone more senior who could finalize the approach and get the project moving. That was fine. All part of the job, whatever. Got wined and dined after the first day, was definitely feeling like the job was a match and that I'd be moving to Denver. Went in the second day, and after another round of interviews the division head takes me to lunch. That's when it all blew up. While we were at lunch, the firm's senior management canned the entire project and fired every person associated with it. Apparently there was a huge internal political war going on. This project was ground zero for the big battle and this division just lost. We get back from lunch and the manager escorts me to HR, where we are going to sit down and go over their offer. Instead, he's told what's going on and that he's out of a job along with everyone else on the project. At this point, I was told to leave. No apologies. It was just crappy luck for me. What the duck? Okay then, I'm gone. I get back to the hotel, and there's a voicemail for me asking me to call the HR people. I'm pissed but I call. They tell me they've had to cancel my return ticket and that I'd need to pay for the hotel myself for now, but that if I would submit an expense report they might be able to get me a check. There's a second voicemail from the front desk asking me to provide a credit card for the stay, and then I get a call on my cell phone from the car rental company which I didn't answer. Turns out they also wanted my credit card. Duck that. I called the airline and they said my reservation had indeed been cancelled, but they also acknowledged that the reservation was paid for using a fully refundable ticket, which I was holding, and which back in the 90s was essentially as good as cash. Said they wouldn't know for certain if I could board until I showed up at the counter with the physical ticket. Great. Just ducking great. I'm on the hook for several thousand in airfare, nice hotel and rental car. After taking several days of vacation from my job for this interview? I don't think so. Here's the revenge. I packed my bags and loaded up the rental car. Left the keys in hotel room door. Drove the rental car back to Dallas. Stayed overnight in Amarillo. Dropped the rental at the Hertz lot at Dallas-Fort Worth Airport. Took their shuttle to the terminal I'd left my car at and drove home. Over the next few months I got several nasty phone calls from their HR and accounting departments demanding I pay them back for the trip, including paying for the $700 drop-off fee for the car. Never answered them of course, just let them go to voicemail. Eventually got a demand letter from their legal department, paid an attorney a nominal fee to send them a demand for compensation / threaten a lawsuit letter. Never heard from the firm again. Side note, the ticket itself was still valid. I ended up selling it to a friend at a big discount, and he was able to use it. To think all he had to do was ignore the problems and they would simply go away. That is until the lawsuit. If only it was that easy. I took the final for an engineering class this morning. Usually 1 or 2 people will go to the bathroom during class. However, for totally unknown reasons, about half of the class needed to use the restroom during the exam. Obviously, a vast majority of them were looking up the answers on their phones. This irritated me, but I just stayed focused and barely finished since it was a hard exam. I remembered that there was one particular problem that was only barely related to the stuff we went over in class, where part A was fairly easy, but I had no idea how to do part B. I didn't fret over it too much though, since that part was only 5 points out of 100. Well, our professor, who is on the older side and I would have thought was somewhat ignorant of technology, sent us an email just now explaining his diabolical plan to catch cheaters. Many of the students in this class use Chegg, a website that has answers to lots of homework questions, if you're not familiar. To be fair, I have an account too, though I only used it for studying and checking homework solutions. Anyway, he explained that he was tired of people going to the bathroom and looking up answers on their phones, so he made the question I mentioned earlier as a trap. He purposely made part B impossible to solve, and about a month before the final, he got a TA with a Chegg account to ask the exact question, which was distinctly worded to be unique. He then created his own Chegg account and answered the question with a bullcrap solution that seems right at first glance, but is actually fundamentally flawed and very unlikely that someone would make the same assumptions and mistakes independently. He said that out of 99 exams, 14 of them fell for the trap, and that everyone who had his wrong solution on their exam was given a 0 and reported to the university for violating the academic honor pledge they signed on the front. He also sent an email to all the other professors in our department giving them the list of cheaters. Edit: I forgot to mention he gave full credit on part B of the question to everyone else. What an odd coincidence that so many people would leave an exam to go use the restroom. Perhaps they wanted to band together to sing the Halo theme song? For those who don't know about this trend, you are missing out. I killed an entire tow company with one phone call. Several years back, I went to work for a towing company. It's about all I know how to do other than paint cars, which is drastically affecting my health. The pay was pretty decent, but we had to share trucks, and the boss felt that he knew where we needed to sit in order to get the best calls. This is important for later. Several months in, I realized that I was not making the type of money that I should be making. So I took the opportunity, while I was sitting in a parking lot one evening, to start researching the laws pertaining to employees in similar positions. He was kind of a butthole, and the trucks had transponders, so that he could see if we had them idling with the air conditioner on a hot day, or idling with the heat on a cold day. He was always calling, complaining about something, if the wheels were not turning. During my research, I discovered that if he was requiring us to sit in a certain parking lot, street, or any location of his choosing, then we were entitled to be paid an hourly wage, not just our commission. The technical term was engaged to wait. However, if he allowed us to freely roam about while we waited for calls, we were not entitled to hourly wages, and we were therefore considered waiting to be engaged. I never mentioned this to him, but I did start taking note of my time. Another month or so goes by, and he decided to start coming down on me for tiny little bullcrap things that ordinarily wouldn't even matter, such as I forgot a pop can in the cup holder. He actually had a screaming fit about that. At this point, I was tired of working there and had already found another job. So I decided it was time to put my plan into motion. I called him up, told him that we needed to have a conversation about my final wages and that we could meet at his convenience. Upon entering the office, I laid out my argument, explained the state law, and told him I expected to be paid for the hours that I was on the clock, but not freely allowed to roam looking for work or able to do things of my choosing. He told me, in no uncertain terms, I would not be paid for that time, as that was agreed to upon my employment. I did not bother to argue, as I already had my next step planned. So I took my final check and I left. The following Monday, I made a phone call to the state labor board, where I laid out my case to them. Needless to say, they were very interested in what was going on. In the end, they came to review his employment records and speak to the driver still working. When he got the bill of what he had to pay us all, it was too much for him to afford, so he sold the trucks, his boat, and lot and went out of business. I never got the money owed to me in full, only a fraction. But the satisfaction of knowing the law just a little bit better than he did and watching it all burn was pure bliss. For an employer to have withheld that much employee pay only to lose his entire company and possessions is crazy and unfortunate. It's not how you start, it's how you finish. If you like the content and want to support the channel, like and subscribe right now, or you'll be running on fumes. Last summer, I was at a cousin's wedding. His bride and her family had been close with ours since before I was born, and the couple had known each other since they were toddlers, so it was a particularly exciting event for both sides of the family. However, after the ceremony was over and the party had only just started, one of the bridesmaids decided to announce her own engagement. The attention was immediately taken away from the newlyweds and brought to the bridesmaid, who I'll call Sarah, and her equally smug fiancé. My cousin's wife, I'll call her Emma, didn't make a scene or utter a single negative word about Sarah. She looked like she was on the verge of tears, but she kept grinning and acted very happy for the other couple. This was unusual, as Emma is typically quite confrontational and speaks her mind, no matter the consequences. Sarah later picked Emma to be the maid of honor at her own wedding, which took place last weekend. I wasn't there for it, but my cousin sent me some of the best bits on Snapchat and explained the whole situation. This is where the fun begins. Emma's two much younger sisters were the flower girls at Sarah's wedding. At the very last moment, Emma switched out the white petals in their baskets to blue ones she had secretly brought with her. She told her sisters not to say anything about it, or let the bride see them, until it was time to scatter them down the aisle. Sarah looked very confused upon seeing the blue petals, which didn't coordinate whatsoever with her theme, but of course she didn't say anything about it in the moment. Most of Sarah's other bridesmaids, who were also Emma's friends, had attended Emma's wedding and were in on Emma's scheme. At the reception, Emma's sisters and the other bridesmaids were tight-lipped when Sarah began demanding to know why there were blue petals. The wedding planner ended up getting a lot of abuse for not checking the flower girls' baskets before they walked down the aisle. Finally, it was time for the speeches. The speeches took place in front of a massive screen, displaying a loop of photos with Sarah and her husband, which had been compiled by Emma. Emma took the remote that controlled the presentation screen and, at first, she showed some pre-approved humorous photos of Sarah with Emma and other friends to facilitate a couple light-hearted jokes. Then, at the very end, Emma said to Sarah that she must be wondering why there were blue petals instead of the white ones originally planned. That was when Emma displayed the last slide from her presentation. Emma announced in front of everyone that she was 5 months pregnant and that she just discovered the baby was a boy, hence the blue petals. The last slide? Her ultrasound picture. There were shocked yells and gasps. Sarah had a fit, but those involved in the scheme cheered so loudly that I sincerely regret watching the Snapchat recordings with headphones. Apparently, Sarah had been very nasty to her bridesmaids before, driving several of them away and forcing the others to pay ridiculous amounts of money for dresses. Emma and my cousin were eventually thrown out of the party, but they were all smiles. Sarah's fuming mother went to confront her outside, and Emma retorted with, "Gentle, gentle. I'm pregnant." I reckon Sarah doesn't speak to the majority of those bridesmaids anymore. That self-important bridesmaid certainly had her own engagement ruined for stealing the spotlight from someone else's special day. Rude. Let me know in the comments below, if someone announced their engagement at your wedding, what would you do? Thanks for watching. Remember to subscribe and turn on the bell or you'll be running on fumes. See you in the next video.